Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our 20 Minutes for Israel from Israel. Um, we are honored to be joined from Israel. Good evening, Dr. Tamar Halpern. It's great to have you with us. And as for those who caught in the pre-show, we're honored to have you. The Halpern family recently made Aliyah, and that's an important perspective. And she also has, a background in mental health as she works both in Israel and in America at this point.
Yeah, well, I'm still in the midst of transferring my license here, but we're getting
Right.
there. It's a
But
process.
but it's deep, deep Hartford connections because Tamar is the great granddaughter of Rabbi Bat, who was one of the foundational uh, orchestrators of the Jewish community in the greater Hartford area, going back a couple of generations. And so it's really an honor and a pleasure for you to be with us. We really appreciate you coming um, and sharing some perspective. Welcome to our virtual Young Israel. If you could
Sure.
just start and just share us a little bit about yourself, your family, and sort of the perspective you come from.
Sure. So thank you so much to Rabbi Brander for inviting me. Where we go back, Rabbi Brander and my husband are old friends. So it's very nice to reconnect in this way. And then my husband is also cousins with, I guess you guys call her Ruthie. Is she just Ruthie, the Yoetzet?
Your Hatzalah, yeah, Ruthie.
Yeah, your Yoetzet Halacha. So we also have that connection there. My husband's from Philadelphia, where Ruthie grew up. Um, so yeah, it's really nice to join you guys. We made Aliyah this summer from Philadelphia. We lived in the Lower Merion Jewish community, which is like the big suburban Jewish community right outside of Philadelphia. Um, we lived there for 10 years while my husband was in medical school and residency and fellowship, and while I pursued a doctoral degree in psychology. And we kind of always knew that we wanted to make Aliyah. It was like kind of always like this 10-year, 11-year plan. And we were just waiting for him to finish all of his training and get licensed and all of the things that we needed to kind of be ready to come. And so we finished all of that and we were like, okay, we're going. Our oldest kid, my oldest son, Shai, is now in fourth grade. And we felt like that was like kind of like our cutoff. Like he was 10, we wanted to still go when our kids were pretty young. And we made the leap. And we live here in a neighborhood in Ramat Beit Shemesh called Ramat Shiloh, which is a really nice, pretty Anglo. There are some Israelis, but very Anglo neighborhood. So we had a lot of friends to begin with that we already knew from before living here, which kind of made it a really kind of nice and smooth transition for us socially. Um, and we had a beautiful Sukkot, and my parents were here visiting, and my sister, who also made Aliyah and lives in Renana. We went on Tiyulim up north. We traveled. We did all kinds of activities. And then, kind of out of nowhere, October 7th happened. And it was definitely not the situation that we were expecting when we made Aliyah. Things had kind of been quiet here for a long time. Um, and I don't know, I guess, Rabbi Brander, let me know kind of what direction you want me to take with this. You want me to talk about what it was like for us then, what it's like for us now?
Well,
Kind
I think if you could, part of what we hope from these is to sort of be able to get a feeling behind the headlines. So you can even tell us a little bit now, like how, you've now been made Aliyah 6 months ago, right? Your children, how are they adjusting? What's the experience that you've been having?
okay, sure. So surprisingly, we're actually really feel pretty well adjusted. I would say my kids, thank God, are doing really well. Definitely immediately after Sukkot was very hard. They did not have school for like 2 or 3 weeks. It very much felt like, oh my gosh, like we cannot do COVID again. Like even the Israeli parents, and even if you knew people there was this feeling with the kids home of like this like doomsday kind of like, how can we do this again to our kids? But even more so with the fact that you were stuck at home, plus there's airplanes flying by and booms going off and sirens. And so it was like this whole added layer. Um, since then, Baruch Hashem, Beit Shemesh has actually been really quiet. We had about a 7 week period, I guess kind of similar to Yerushalayim, where we had no sirens at all. Until I would say like 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, when Yerushalayim had a bunch of sirens on Friday night, we also got some here. But because of that, I would say in a way, there's this weird dichotomy where to some extent, life here in Beit Shemesh has kind of gone back to normal. Like all the kids are back in school. If you're not in Miluim, everyone's back at work. Everyone's shopping. Everyone's going about their business. So I think, so that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, there's also days where there are like these really stark reminders. Like if there's a chayal from the city who's killed, like then it feels very close to home. And like all of a sudden it's like everyone knows who it is. And somehow there's some connection to the family. Even a few weeks ago, there was a week or two ago, there was an Ethiopian chayal who was killed. And you would think like, oh, what connection do we have to that? And then all of a sudden there was a thing for my son's school of, oh, he was a graduate of our school. There's always like, I'm sure you all feel this in general in the Jewish community, like somehow, some way, there's always some kind of connection. So I would say that those days or weeks have been harder as a parent, just kind of like keeping it all together, right? Like you're having emotions or looking at the news or hearing or going to a shiva for someone. And then you kind of also have to pretend for your kids that everything's normal. But I would say because we really haven't had a lot of sirens here and life has gone back pretty much back to normal, the kids are really experiencing it as regular. They go to school, they go to their chugim after school, they're back to running around the neighborhood and running around in the park. And I would say it's amazing to see how resilient kids are. And even my kids, just having moved here, like they know what to do. Like I'll give an anecdote or a story. So a few Friday nights ago, we were in the park. Oftentimes I take like my little kids to the park while my husband's at shul. And a lot of the moms are in the park Friday night because shul starts so early, like our neighborhood park. And because we hadn't had a siren in 7 weeks, it like really came out of nowhere. And there was like a million kids in the park and it was total chaos. And we all start like grabbing our kids and running to like there's a bunch of houses across the street. So we run to a friend's house across the street. And all of a sudden I realized like, oh my gosh, where's Micha, who's my 6-year-old? Because oftentimes the older kids at the park kind of run off on their own and he was playing soccer and with friends. And it's not like the type of thing by that age that I have to like be on top of him every second and know exactly where he is. So I turn back and start like screaming for him. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's probably going to be on the soccer field crying, frozen. And then he ended up hearing me scream for him. And he was already halfway toward, there's a yeshiva in our neighborhood. I don't know if any of you have heard of Lev HaTorah. It's like a post high school yeshiva. A lot of the modern Orthodox boys from different communities go there. And I guess at some point I had told him, if you're ever in the park and a siren goes off, like run to Lev HaTorah. And he was already by himself with his friends, like halfway there. So you really see how they're so resilient and they just adjust. And then after this happened, like once the siren was over, I was like a little shaken up and wanted to go home. And my kids were like, okay, can we go back to the park now? Like, I want to finish my soccer game. And to them, it's just like, and really that was the healthy response. Like we should go back and we should continue because I don't want them to be scared or to really feel like something's wrong. But yeah, so I guess that's a good way of kind of just demonstrating kind of how they're doing.
In the journey from October 7th to today, are there like one or two points or narratives sort of that stuck out to you, both in contrast to being a new Ola to Israel and just being on the ground?
I think what sticks out for me, kind of living here in Beit Shemesh, is that and I wonder if you felt this way also, like coming on a mission. It's hard and weird where on the one hand, there's so many places in the country that like it's such a positive thing, right? It shows the resilience of the Jewish people, and there's so much chesed, and everyone's doing so much. Um, and cooking meals for wives who their husbands are on miluim, and hosting in my neighborhood, people just opens up their homes. One of my neighbors hosted a family from Ofakim with 10 kids in her basement. Like people, just the amount of chesed is incredible. And so on the one hand, like seeing the strength and how like life goes on, and like, right, as Jewish people, that's how we've learned how to survive, right? And this idea of resilience, and that we keep going, and that we believe in Hashem, and we use that strength. And then on the other hand, that contrast with that for some people in Israel, right, life is so not normal, right? Like if you went to these hotels where evacuees are staying, or if you took a tour down south of the communities that were, massacred and destroyed on October 7th. And so sometimes I like think about that in a weird way. Like on the one hand, like how could life be so normal for me when for all these other people, it's so not.
Shifting gears for a second, sort of putting on your professional hat. You look at Israeli society and sort of the resilience, but also sort of the challenge ahead. How do you, as a mental health professional, sort of look at that?
It's a good question. So I know for myself personally, and like I feel like I've been like talking with friends a lot about this, is that same balance is really important in your personal life. So like I know for me, I've like even as an Ola Hadasha, I've really tried to just like jump right into Israeli society and like volunteer for things that I can. Like one of my friends arranged, there's like a bunch of moshavim around Beit Shemesh, like farms that obviously are like totally have no workers and whatever. We went to pick eggplants one day, and I've been making meals for moms who have been home, right, for weeks and weeks on end by themselves with their kids. Or at the beginning, I was collecting things, blankets and different things for evacuee families. And all that stuff is amazing. Or, also like there was a week where I went to like 3 different shivas that were going on in Beit Shemesh. And all of that was amazing. And then at some point, you do start to feel like mentally and emotionally and physically exhausted. And so I think just like being in tune with that on the individual level is so important. Like it was a sign for me of like, this is amazing and it's such important work. And it's okay to take a step back from that for a week. Like if you need to give yourself a break, or if your kids are having a hard time, like that needs to be like as an Ola Hadasha, like one of my boys was having a bit of trouble like adjusting to school. And I was like, okay, like this really needs to be where I put my koho and my strengths right now. So I think on a personal level, just being in tune with where you're at emotionally and mentally, and then like adjusting accordingly. And sometimes those adjustments can be like week by week. Sometimes they need to be like day by day. But just really being in tune with that, I think.
So you have a unique perspective, both being in Israel and part of the society there, but also being so close to being where we are, being in America, being part of the culture and society, having grown up here. With that unique perspective, and talking to both the people here, but also the many people who will listen to this afterwards, is there something you think we as American Jews need to know?
So I think the most helpful thing, and I don't know, maybe this has come up, like you guys have had a lot of speakers by now, but I know like I had a conversation with my mother-in-law about this. My mother-in-law, obviously, when the war broke out, was extremely anxious about us. We lived very close. My husband grew up in Philadelphia, so we lived right near my in-laws. She was saying like, "Are you sure you don't want to come back? Like you can live with us." And David and I really felt like we had made the right choice coming. And as the weeks went on, we kept trying to explain to her that as as hard and as terrible as the things that happened here were and are, like that there's also this such a strong sense here of like Jewish pride, and tzionut and achdut and chesed and just this all of these amazing things that came out of this. Um, and I think that it's hard. It's like from being abroad, I think, right, the focus in the news is so much on, right, all the focus in the news is on how many people are being killed and what happened in this place and what happened in that place and the anti-Semitism at the universities and all the things with anti-Semitism that are going on in the States. Um, and so the focus is really kind of on this like negative and panic and despair. Obviously, I'm saying this from what I've heard from people in the States. I obviously don't want to put words into how any of you might be feeling or experiencing it. But I think that something people get from either speaking with people who live here or just coming to visit themselves is leaving with that feeling of strength, of achdut, of we can get through this together. And that, not that things, I don't want to belittle kind of what's going on here, not that things aren't as bad, but that there's also this positive energy that's going on in Israeli society. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. And I just want for the listeners at home, right? You don't just say that's Stam, right? Your family also had relative that was killed in action.
Yes. Yeah. So so this relative who was killed is also a member of the larger Bat family. So he would be also a great grandson of Rabbi Bat. So my second cut, my dad is first cousins with a family from Otniel named the Marks, Javi and Mickey Mark. I'm sure many of you might have read about this family in the news. Unfortunately, the father was unfortunately murdered in a terrorist attack about 7 years ago on the road between Otniel and Yerushalayim. And the mother was pretty severely injured. And then since then, unfortunately, the family's just had a lot of tragedies. And most recently, I think it was the first week that the soldiers went into Gaza. He was one of the first units to go in. And I don't know if anyone remembers reading about this. There was a Namar, which is like I don't know, the armored vehicle it's some kind of armored vehicle that the army calls a Namar. It was hit with some kind of rocket type of thing. And unfortunately, 11 soldiers in the Namar were killed. And one of them was Pidaya Mark. So yeah, everything that I say is also with holding that there definitely have been personal moments throughout the last number of weeks that as much as life has been normal, it's also been there's been moments that have been really not normal and really difficult. So like Pidaya Mark, the second cousin of mine who was killed, that was extremely difficult. And then in the neighborhood that I live in Ramat Shiloh, I don't know if anyone has listened online to any of the things. There was a soldier, a family of American Olim, the Airleys. So Benjamin Airley was from our neighborhood. And unfortunately, he was also killed. So that also hit very close to home, and kind of like the entire neighborhood rallied around this family. And if you want any chizuk, I would highly recommend listening to Jen, his mom, speak. She's been speaking a lot publicly since then. And she's just really an incredibly strong woman who gives a lot of strength listening to her.
Tamar, we get a lot of strength from hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking
Thanks for having me.
I think part of this is also our way of connecting, over the course of the week, but behind the headlines, the actual people of Israel. And that's something I think from our perspective, that's just so important for us to make sure is part of our daily routine. Thank you so
Yeah, I
much
think
for sharing.
this type of program is so amazing because I feel like it really does help give you guys a sense of, right, even in every part of Israel, different people are experiencing different things. And I feel like it's such a nice way to connect, to really get a feeling of how everyone's experiencing it.
So thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
hopefully we should come together for better occasions, and wish our best to your family and stay safe. Thank you
Amazing.
everyone for
You
joining
too.
us, and we'll pick up again next week on Tuesday for the next installment of 20 Minutes for Israel from Israel.